Yeah, I do.
Well,
But we'll do the fire chief. You ready for agenda item number 5, proposed changes to fire and volunteer rescue incentive program, which relates to what we just repealed?
That's correct.
Thank you, sir. With
the repeal of that ordinance, it does open the door to develop a stipend in lieu of that property tax relief. Mr. Sharp, who came before you during the public hearing comment, was correct. We did not share this draft plan of a stipend with the company chiefs until last night, which was our regularly scheduled monthly meeting with the departments. As with any policy, we would expect that this policy sits on the table for 30 days for comments within the department. It is not a board policy per se, but a department policy of how we distribute those funds should you allot to allocate those out of the general fund for a stipend program. So before you, you have a draft of that program. It has been shared with the volunteer leadership and leadership in the department. We would like that plan to sit on the table for 30 days to garner comments back from the leadership. From the board, though, we would be looking for some degree of funding allocation for the stipend program. A monetary amount, if the board so chose, to establish that we would divide up amongst the people in the stipend. I can go over the draft stipend that you have before you if you'd like. I'll just hit the high spots if you want, or I can just answer questions about the funding or the program itself.
Questions? Any questions? Mr. Bly, do you have a question?
So if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're asking us to do tonight is to make sure that the funding is available for the incentive program, that you're not prepared to roll out the incentive program from A to Z, but you want the funding available for the incentive program. Is that correct?
Yeah, what we did, the staff was directed to put a program together. We did. Because of the timeliness, it was shared last night with the leadership.
Yes.
They need to have some time to comment on it. That only makes sense. But it is not a board policy, so you don't have to adopt it. This is just how we're going to execute the delivery of funds. But there are no funds to deliver. So that's correct. So since you repealed the tax, before I move forward with the plan, we need to know that there will be some monetary amount set aside for this program.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And you basically, well, not you because you just got here, but the volunteers who participated in the program we just repealed got that benefit in June and December of last year. And hopefully by the time we get ready for June of this year, they'll see this new program in place.
Yeah, with any policy, sits on the table 30 days, and I'll entertain comment on that policy.
Okay.
And finalize it.
Well, I think it's probably the board's intention to provide some funding.
Okay.
And I guess we will listen to your comments that you come back in 30 days and determine exactly how much. Plus, we'll do our own deliberation. Okay?
All right.
Thank you, Chief. We're going to take a 10 Earth-minute break. It's 9:57. Okay, 13 minutes. 10 minutes after 9. Mr. Schiebel, you're next, and then Mr. Fincher. And then we're done. All right? Okay. All right, we're going to reconvene. We have agenda items 6, 7, and 8 to conclude, and then closing board comments. So, Mr. Schiebel, thanks for being here, and you're here to address the proposed changes to recycling methods, and since that's already in the budget, it's probably a little redundant that you're here, but go right ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening. Tonight, we bring before you a recommendation to change our recycling methods. During the creation of the budget this year, I tried crunching some numbers to figure out what we could do better to save the county money, and made a recommendation to the county administrator to save us $140,000+ by changing the way that we do that to in-house method, and compared that pretty thoroughly. That was put into the budget, and he accepted that. And during that time, he thought it was a good idea before we changed this that the Board of Supervisors had input that we wanted to do that. So that's why we're really before you today, is to make sure that you're aware of the changes that we're recommending as part of the budget. So the purpose of this document was just to kind of outline currently what we do and what we're proposing. Currently, we have a contractor that picks up commingled recycling at all of our convenience sites. About 10 years ago, we used to do this ourselves. However, it was not commingled then. We had containers, and you had room to put glass, you had room for metal, you had cardboard, you had paper, tin had to be separated, plastics if it was clear or colored, all the stuff had to be separated. Problem was we had no good way of being able to sort this material, put it on the ground or anything else without a transfer station. And it just became where we started collecting a lot of stuff in the containers and found out we couldn't do it, and we narrowed it down to only collecting a few items. During that time, we decided to contract this out. We spend about $195,000 a year in recycling. We have a mandate of 15% that we're mandated to meet because we do not have a landfill to recycle from the county. We're averaging about 15.1 to 15.2%, so we're just above the threshold. There's nothing, if we don't meet that mandate, they're going to come down and ask us to do some different additional things to try to do that. State will. But we've been doing a good job of just barely maintaining it. With some of the new partners we have in the community, such as McKesson, they do a recycling program. We get to take all their credits. We've got a pallet manufacturer that recycles pallets down in Frog Level. We do that. The AP Hill is one of our big contributors. We've got a lot from there. Mr. Giles has the auto salvage and recycles metal. We get to claim all that. So we get to claim the recycling efforts that are done throughout the county as well. Well, since now we can commingle, which basically means that you put everything into a single stream, one box, you can dump everything into it, and now you can dump that. And now they'll take, and they've got a magnet, they'll pull the metal out, they dump it in water, the plastics float, the metal sinks, and they've got a bunch of different options now where you can do that yourself in a single stream method. And it has really changed the way that we do that. We can modify our current boxes that we haven't used for about 10 years, paint those, put stickers on them, and we can start doing that ourselves. In doing that, we are going to see some additional cost. One is the cost of upgrading the current containers. We've got about $14,000 to do that. We're also going to have additional staff time. Right now, we average about 20 hours a week of overtime at the landfill, and we estimate we're probably going to have another 10 to 13 hours of overtime a week to do this. So we've looked at that. We've looked at the additional wear and tear on the trucks and how much that's going to cost us each year. We've looked at fuel cost and what's that going to cost us. And we've come up that it's going to cost us about $55,000, $56,000 to be able to do this program compared to the $195,000 that we did. Now, in saying that, we've got a couple numbers. We'll save $122,000 by doing this ourselves with our own equipment. That includes all the money that it takes for overtime, gas, transportation, repair and maintenance, and replacement of the vehicle. We're also going to have asking the board to look at the current money that we spend at the school system to recycle there. We spend about $17,000 a year in recycling school recyclables at separate containers. One thing eventually we would like to do is separate cardboard. Cardboard brings a premium right now for money. So eventually we would like to go to a method of recycling just cardboard because we can get paid for that. Tipping fees for recyclables. When we first started recycling, I've been here coming up on 19 years now, and we were doing some recycling, very little then. It cost us money to get rid of glass. It cost us money to get rid of tires. It still costs money to get rid of tires. But now you get money for paper. We used to not get any money. It used to cost us money. We can now get paid for paper. You can get paid for cardboard. You can get paid for aluminum if you separate it out. We can dump it now at no charge at all. We're not paying any charges now. It's all transportation. So in the future, we know that we can make some additional revenues by making some changes and being able to do some of the recycling and separating that. That'll come eventually with the transfer station. I know we've talked about that. It's been in the CIP, and money has stopped us from doing that. But eventually, that's where we'll get. So essentially what we're going to do is we're asking the board to allow us to change the recycling method, to allow staff to be able to refurbish the boxes that we have and start doing this in-house, again with the additional expenses, and to charge the school systems for their fair share of the recycling costs that we pay. And it'll be $140,152 is the estimated savings in next year's budget. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you, Mr. Schiebel. Any questions? Ms. Black?
Mr. Schiebel, first of all, I want to thank you. This is a great idea. The only question or concern I have is the money that the school on the cost of the schools. Have the schools been notified about this?
They have not. That was one of the reasons why we wanted to bring this before the board, so that we could let them know, be aware that this would be coming. One of the things I think this board has been trying to do is show the true expenses of the school system. Another thing that we're working on now to bring back to the board as well is we provide all of this service for trash service for the school systems. We maintain all the compactors. We buy all the compactors. We pay for all the trash hauling, all the tipping fees, fuel, everything to provide trash service to the schools. That really ought to be a school expense. Maybe as we look at that, it might be something that the board says, well, we need to transfer some of the money that's in the budget that we're paying into the school budget, so it's actually shown as an expenditure to the school. But that is something we want to bring back and show the expenses that the county pays out of its general fund that's not reflected for a school expense and really should be.
Okay. And do you have one or the other plans to talk to Dr. Kilo about this, or?
We were trying to get the board's approval to look at this first.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Taylor?
No, I don't.
Mr. Underwood?
Let's go back and talk about overtime again.
Okay.
Can you go back and discuss staffing?
Yeah, we actually had looked at, we can actually justify a full-time position with the current overtime that we have due to the lengthy hauls that we have going to Richmond and the staff time that it takes to trying to get the loads in a day. So between the 5 staff members that are in the truck day in and day out, we average about 20 hours of overtime between those drivers. And we're going to pick up additional time doing the recycling as well. Right now, the employee costs, we're looking at about $23,884.80 in overtime per month. Per year, I'm sorry. Per year. So it'll be 80 hours a month is what we're figuring it'll be to be able to do the program.
So I guess my question is, if we need that person and obviously going to pay for itself, why are we paying overtime? I just, as a business person, have never liked looking at overtime. I think it's...
We were instructed no new personnel in the budget, and that's what we presented. So it's a cost savings, and it's definitely something that we think we'll be able to justify a full-time position for. We figured that we would go forward with this year, put it under our belt, prove to the board that we've actually saved the money, and at that point come back in next year's budget and show that we've got the overtime to be able to justify a full-time position that will actually save the county money.
Okay. Then my other comment is just about it being in the budget.
I understand. We put it in the budget, and again, we thought it was something important for the board to be able to give their blessing to, that they would like us to proceed with doing this, since it is a major change in procedures that we do now.
But not after being in the budget, you're asking for it.
Again, I thought this was something that we were going to save money, and it's even close to $150,000. We thought was a good decision to move forward, and Mr. Parton thought this was something we needed to make sure the board was aware of.
Dead horse, I won't beat it, but...
I guess my only comment is that I don't mind informing the schools of what their cost is right now for what we're doing, but what I don't want to do is go to them now and say, okay, you owe us $65,000 for hauling trash, maintaining compactors, and hauling. At this point in time, the budget is the budget. I do like the idea of keeping track of the time, the cost of the material, and all those kinds of things so we can start to compare things, but I just don't want to start, here's an additional cost we're expecting you to pay this year.
Right.
Yeah, and I think probably what will happen is it's in-out money anyhow. So it's kind of like the utility fund. If we waive the $65,000, the $46,000 that Mr. Carson asked for earlier, we're going to waive that, then we're going to take it out of the utility fund, and then somebody's going to say the utility fund's losing money. So we'll give it to the schools, charge them for it, so they have a net zero. We have some accounting or something like that. So that's probably what will happen in this case. We'll charge you, and then we'll fund you, and then take it back. So it'll be even. Okay. Well, since we've already included this in the budget, is there a motion to approve the new proposed changes to recycling?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Black, seconded by Mr. Seeley, that we approve the proposed changes to recycling. Just one discussion on the motion. I just have one more question, Mr. Schiebel. The 122 you're saying we're going to save, 122,488.04 per year?
Yes, sir. That's the estimate.
That revenue number is in the budget? as additional revenue exactly as it is? Decrease in expense.
Right.
So that 122,
It was 195,000 in the
Right.
budget, it's now 55,000 in the budget. And then we also put some additional money in the overtime slot as well.
all right, we may, based on the cost of gas and whatever, we might not get to that, but it is a savings. I commend you on it. I think it's a great job. I think it's outstanding thinking outside the box, because that's the kind of creativity we really need right now, especially this year. So I appreciate
Absolutely.
what you did, Mr. Shebel.
You're welcome, thank you.
And forgive me, but we did have a motion there, so if there's no further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Agenda item number 7. Mr. Fincham, you've been here a long time patiently. Thank you very much. First reading on the proposed amendment to Chapter 45 of the Code of Caroline County, Erosion and Sediment Control. Mr. Fincham.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I have what I hope is a fairly simple request of the board, which is for you to allow me to advertise an amendment to the Erosion and Sediment Control Ordinance to add one paragraph, paragraph E, to Article 5 of Chapter 45, which would change the permitting requirement for erosion sediment control permits from a one-time permit to an annual permit. Currently, we have development projects in this county that are 5 or 6 years old. 5 or 6 years ago, we issued an erosion and sediment control permit, collected the fees to cover the cost of administering that program one time. While that permit remains active, we also have the state-mandated inspection responsibilities of that site. We are not collecting any fees to cover the cost of those inspection services, and therefore the support for those services falls on the county taxpayers. This amendment would allow us to collect an annual fee based upon the annual permit, thereby shifting or helping to shift the financial cost of that program back to the development in question. With that, I'll answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fincham. Any questions? Stanley?
What kind of funds are associated with this?
For larger projects, there's a base fee, and then there's a fee per acre. It varies depending on whether the size of the project. Okay, so a 20-acre project, for example, might have a fee of, say, $5,000. A single-family dwelling, which typically you can build, unless you're like me doing my addition, most people can build their house within a year's time, would just have the one-time fee for the residential permit. It's typically your larger projects, your subdivisions, that are ongoing over a longer period of time that require the continued inspection support from our department.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Underwood?
No comments, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Seeley? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fincham. We have two choices. We can have you come back for an additional reading, or we can go right to public hearing. How does the board wish to handle this, since we're only changing one paragraph?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we just go to public hearing.
Second?
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Underwood, seconded by Mr. Black, that we move the proposed amendment of Chapter 45 of the Code of Caroline County to public hearing. You have an idea on the date? May 8th? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Parton, you have agenda item number 8. Capital project summary should be fairly short. And then DMV to go. Whatever else you have.
Really have nothing else to add, Mr. Chairman. Very quickly, you have the status of the capital projects, and be happy to answer any questions about that. And DMV to go announcement has already been made, and That's all we had this evening.
Mr. Black said again that was on the 23rd. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Parton. There is no closed meeting, so we will have closed comments or closing board comments and then adjourn. Mr. Black, closing board comments.
Not at this time.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes, I do, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to take a minute to react to some of the statements that were made during the public hearing and maybe clear up what might very easily be some, I guess, misconceptions if you weren't here at the meeting. First of all, I'd like to say that there are several ways that the board deals with issues once it's voted on. Whether we're talking about an ordinance request or zoning or special exception or whatever, if there is an issue and we vote on it and it fails, then that means there's a prevailing side. That means it's 4-2 or 5-1 or whatever. If we have an issue and it does not fail, but it doesn't pass because it's a tie vote, that makes for a different situation in the way that it can be handled. If an issue fails, it can only be brought up by someone from the prevailing side. If it's a tie, then it's determined that the issue can be brought up at any time if a majority of the board agrees to reconsider it. And that's what happened with the fireworks ordinance. When we took the first vote on the fireworks ordinance, it did not fail, but it didn't pass either because there was no prevailing side. It was a 3-3 vote. At the next meeting, a majority of the board decided to revisit it. Perfectly legal, it's nothing unethical. After it was decided to revisit it, a new vote was taken and the ordinance passed. It's as simple as that. It was, again, nothing illegal, it was nothing unethical. It happens. So basically, I would just end that part by saying when we sit here, there are very few things that we do that everybody agrees on. There's always going to be a percentage of the population who's going to disagree with something that's done here. We don't even all agree ourselves as board members. That's why we have 4-2 votes, 5-1 votes. But we do agree that the majority rules. And if something is done, if it's done correctly, if there is no illegal action or nothing unethical, then it stands. And that's just the way it is. I would like to satisfy everybody, but you can't do it. People have different ideas. They think differently. And that's why when we put people in office, whether we're talking local government or state government or federal government, when we elect people to office, we elect them to make decisions for us. Sometimes they make decisions we don't like. Hopefully, most times they make decisions that we agree with. But the bottom line is, once it's made, it's done, and that's just the way it is. The only other thing I would like to add is there is a possibility that we will be having toll booths reinstated on Interstate 95. And I was at the George Washington Regional Commission meeting last night, and there was someone from VDOT there who talked about that very issue. And the tolling booth, and it's not all finalized yet, but the location of the tolling booth has to be below the Massaponax exit, 126, which very well might end up in Caroline County. So with the, I guess, consent of the board, I would like at some point maybe to have someone come and talk to the board about that and maybe see what we can do to maybe make our pitch for that, because that could be a sizable amount of revenue that could go towards transportation issues. And I just think it's something that could be beneficial to the county. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Mr. Underwood?
Just a couple comments, Mr. Chairman. I have concern when comment is made that we did something underhanded. That irritates me to a great deal when we're following the procedures. And could things be done differently? I guess you learn from decisions that you make. But I'm hoping that nobody on this board intentionally does anything underhanded. I'm hoping, I'm praying that's not the case. So I didn't like that comment at all, and I just wanted to make that comment. Second, Mr. Chairman, as far as the budgets go, I've listened to people talk about their budget. No one wants to cut anyone's budget if money's available. That's not what we're talking or discussing. The discussion is, if it costs you $1 million in revenue to run the county, and you only receive $800,000, regardless of the superior services that you've received in the past, you have to make cuts to balance your budget. Only common sense. So I am tired of people saying that we don't like what the schools are doing, we don't like what fire and rescue is doing, don't like what the sheriff has absolutely nothing to do with what we're talking about. It's just talking about there's only so much money to do so much work, and you have to make cuts. You have to prepare for tomorrow, and the way to prepare tomorrow, based on what I know about business, is you cut and you try to generate as much additional revenue for that, I call it rainy day fund. And I think that's what we're moving towards. I can't change last year's decisions or last 5 years' decisions, but I certainly can have an impact on what happens from this point forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have no comment, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I forgot to mention something. Can I just mention something briefly? And it's about community meetings. Just take 2 seconds, 10 seconds.
And you just want to take advantage of me because I'm a really nice guy.
Yeah.
Go right ahead.
Just a quick reminder, I forgot to mention this. I'll be having community meetings Monday and Tuesday of next week. Monday is Rehoboth Methodist Church, and then in Charlesburg, and then the Tuesday evening, the following night, will be in the Lake Landor Clubhouse inside Lake Landor. All are welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Black. Okay. I don't have any specific board comments. I just want to make sure, I guess, for Mrs. Hall, that we include for public comment, I have Sheriff Lipa and 34 others. 34. So I think that was close to the number we had. I just wanted to make sure, he's gone. I just want to make sure we at least had that. I don't think there's anything else that claims our attention this evening. Motion to adjourn would be in order.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Taylor, seconded by Mr. Underwood. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Board stands adjourned.